this evening. I know that we've got 8 at least different groups of organizations that are supportive of veterans in our communities, and perhaps we may be strangers in the sense that we don't know each other personally, but I just want to suggest that when it comes to the values and commitments to service and protecting this nation's veterans, we are all very good friends, even though we may not have met yet. So thank you very much for coming today. Today is a little bit of a bittersweet opportunity and point in time. There's going to be an update later on this evening that's going to talk about some legislation that was voted on today, and unfortunately things did not go in a way that we wanted to. And I'm going to share those details earlier, but I point that out because you may think that the scheduling of today's event was a little bit of a gift of God to coincide with this vote today. But that actually would be a little bit less than true, because the reality is this effort to privatize VA healthcare, this effort to dismantle government services, period, is not something that's going to happen on one day with one vote. It's going to be a continuing stampede that is going to keep on evolving. And I assure you that many of the forces that may call themselves supportive of the troops, may call themselves supportive of veterans, and may even be driving around with that stated commitment that usually is exemplified by a Chinese yellow ribbon magnet on the back of the car, is not going to rest until they have privatized veterans' health care. So I ask that you all keep that in mind. This is not a sprint, it's very much a marathon. And I want to thank in particular some superheroes in my world that I want to point out. Would all the executive board members for Local 2157 please stand, if you wouldn't mind? Marsha Blaine, Kimberly Bach, Terry Funk, really appreciate their efforts. This is the AFGE local that represents the staff that works at the Veterans Healthcare Administration, both at the medical center as well as the regional office downtown. And with that said, I want to introduce the superhero of today, someone that I've known for many, many years. And she's done an outstanding job of putting this event together and bringing together a wide variety of coalitions. And this whole idea of being in a church, I think, really brings it home for all of us. Betsy Zucker.
Hey!
Well, thank you all for being here. And this event was started, it's hosted by AFGE, that's my union, our local 2157. We have support from our district and from national. But we have a lot of organizations here, and I really just want to give a shout out to all the organizations that support us. Our labor partners, Oregon AFL-CIO, the Labor Council, our community groups, Healthcare for All Oregon, Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility, Community Radio, and really a big shout out to the Economic Justice Action Group of First Unitarian Church, which is the reason that we are here. Also, our veteran partners. We are co-sponsored by the Veterans Healthcare Action Campaign, and also the real rock stars are Veterans for Peace.
Yeah.
Chapter 72 here in Portland, and Veterans for Peace have taken on this struggle to save the VA from privatization as a main force of what they're doing, and it means everything. I'm a union member. I'm also a retired VA employee. I worked for 15 years as a nurse practitioner at the Portland VA, something I'm very proud of. And I see people here who have been employees at the VA also, and I wonder if they could just stand, raise your hand. very much. And I get the honor of introducing Suzanne Gordon, who I just met today. Suzanne's an incredible healthcare journalist. She has expertise in healthcare systems, in nursing, in patient safety, and she has spent the last several years researching and writing about, becoming an expert about the VA. And she is one of our strongest supporters in the country. So thank you, Suzanne, for being here.
I want to thank you so much for having me here today. I want to thank Betsy. I want to thank your local. I want to thank all the people who sponsored the event. I want to thank the Congress people's staff who are here and who have come out to educate themselves, particularly Congresswoman Bonamici,
Yes.
who voted against the dreadful
Thank you.
Mission.
what? Your
Congresswoman Bonamici today joined Congressman Blumenauer in taking a very courageous stand and standing with the VA, the caregivers, and veterans by voting against the privatization.
Please.
Yay!
And just a good example, I know we have representatives also here from Congressman Blumenauer's office and Senator Wyden's office. If anybody else is here, you should introduce yourself now. All right.
Can I ask how many veterans are in the audience? Oh, wow. Well, I'm asking because the union has graciously offered to give everyone who is a veteran, and you don't have to give us your DD 214 to prove it, or any of your medical information, a free book, Battle for Veterans Healthcare. So please come up later and I will sign it for you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you already bought one, you can get another one and give it to somebody else. I have 15 minutes, so I'm not going to go through the thank yous to all the wonderful people because I just want to talk to you about why I'm here, who I am, and why I think this is such an important issue. I am not a veteran. None of my children are veterans. Nobody in my family is a veteran. My daughter is a nurse practitioner. Had the honor of working for the VA in West Haven, Connecticut for a year and now works for Bernie Sanders. But she's not a veteran. I have no stake in this, you know. Nobody's paying me. I wish they were. You know, people often say, "Are you being paid for by the VA?" And I say, "The check has been in the mail for the past 10 years." You know, I am doing this because I'm a healthcare journalist and researcher who's been covering private sector healthcare for 35 years or more. I'm a patient in the private sector system. And I have actually, thanks to my wonderful husband who worked for the Communications Workers Union for many years, I have what's called Cadillac coverage. And I have to tell you, I will never get the kind of care that veterans get at the VA when it's at its best. I will never experience that. Because we, out there in the private sector, have disintegrated, fragmented, episodic disease treatment. We don't have a healthcare system in this country. We don't have a mental health system in this country. We have 7,600, get that, 7,600 geriatricians in America to serve an aging population. We have a shortage of something like 40,000 primary care providers. We have one of every 7 healthcare dollars goes to, for us in the private sector, over treatment, unnecessary treatment, because, you know, if you have a hammer and you get paid by the hit, then everybody looks like the most lucrative nail. The VA, I've spent the past 5 years writing a new book called Wounds of War, How the VA Delivers Health, Healing, and Hope to the Nation's Veterans. And I describe a system that in Congress right now, they are setting the stage to dismantle if we do not pay attention. And if we do not commit ourselves in this room, as so many people have done, to protecting a system that we as Americans have invested in for the past 70 years. We've made an investment, a social investment, a financial investment, an ethical investment in creating a healthcare system for veterans. Now, that healthcare system has problems. Every single person in this room who's seen the VA, who's been to the VA, knows that there are problems, right? How could you not have problems in the largest healthcare system in the country and one of the largest in the world? Yes, there will be facilities like Roseburg that have problems. There will be facilities like Phoenix that have problems. But did anybody ever tell you, everybody knows about Phoenix, right? Phoenix, where the wait time scandal. Did anybody ever tell you this little important detail? That every year in Phoenix, 25,000 snowbirds descend on Phoenix for 4 months. How do you staff a healthcare system where 25,000 patients come into it for 4 months? You're an administrator, you're a nurse, you're a doctor. Valdez, could you come over for 4 months and, by the way, figure it out after the 4 months is over? I mean, that was like a little tiny detail that Jeff Miller, when he was the head of House Veterans Affairs Committee, kind of neglected to mention. You know, when Miller, who's they're suggesting to be the new Secretary of the House Veterans Affairs, Miller complained because you veterans, like in Portland, the VA was spending $5.4 million on art for 6 years. God forbid they should put art in their hospitals so that you could heal better as veterans. What he neglected to mention was that $5.4 million, excuse me, it was over 10 years, the budget of the VA for those 10 years was $750 billion. There are so many zeros after the decimal point in that I couldn't even do it on my computer, what that represented of the budget. You have people now who will take any itsy-bitsy thing or big thing that the VA does wrong and blow it up and suggest that the private sector can do it better. Because what is happening now, as we speak now, in Congress, is a successful, sadly, attempt by the billionaire Koch brothers, who hate government and want to destroy anything in government that works. Hedge fund tycoons like Steve Cohen, who was narrowly avoided going to prison for the largest insider trading scheme in U.S. history, who set up an alternative mental health system to the VA. And you have hospitals circling like vultures, not because they want to take care of your PTSD or your MST or your Agent Orange or your rehab or your homelessness or your legal problems like the Veterans Justice Justice Outreach Program does. What they want is the money for your hip replacement and your MRI, right? And, your episodic treatment, right? They can't take care of us to manage chronic problems. They don't want yours, because guess what? Yours are worse. The average, I'm 72, the average Medicare recipient has 3 to 5 presenting problems. The average Vietnam vet has 9 to 12. Right? And you are, the veterans in this room and the veterans who the VA takes care of are poorer, sicker, older, sicker, right, than any other patient in America. The average veteran has more pain problems, more mental health problems, more problems for suicide risk, more substance abuse problems, on and on and on, than any patient, most patients out there, particularly the kind of middle-income patients that the insurers and the hospitals like the Cleveland Clinic and so forth love to cherry-pick. And right now, what's happening in this bill in Congress is that under the name of giving veterans more choice, right? And in America, who could be against choice, right? They are trying to give you the same kind of choice we have on television, right? Which is kind of 500 of the same channels, right? Or the kind of choice we have when we fly, right? 500, so I don't know, 4 or however many of the same kind of uncomfortable seats in an airplane. They don't want to give you real choice because they're eliminating the VA as a choice. What they're doing in this bill, and this is part of the privatization effort. So I want to just step back because we're talking about VA privatization. Now, everyone in Congress says they're against privatization. The people who just voted for this bill say they're against privatization. And it's absolutely critical for us to understand what privatization is and isn't. When they say they're against privatization, what they mean is they're against tomorrow we sell off the Portland VA, we fire, and every other VA in the country, we fire all the staff, we auction off the medical equipment and the beds and blah, 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 blah. And they say, well, we're not for that, right? Actually, the ultimate aim is that, but they know that veterans, veterans view that as poison. They don't want privatization. But what privatization really is a spectrum. That is at the extreme end of the spectrum. It's kind of like school choice. Now, nobody says we're going to abolish all the public schools and give people vouchers to go to private schools. What they do is what they're doing now. They starve the VA of resources. Bernie Sanders, in 2014, met with the VA, met with the VSOs, and they said to him, we need $21 billion, 2014, to make the VA work. The Republicans killed him. You can go online and listen to Jeff Sessions saying, our veterans wouldn't want us to use all this money. Really? Really? And they killed that bill. Then Phoenix came, and then Sanders and McCain made this compromise. It got the VA $16 billion, of which 10 went to outsourcing care. The VA needed $21 billion, and it got actually 5 for clinical care because they used another billion for other things. So that meant the VA was like $19 billion behind in 2014, right? And it has not caught up. So when the president says we're adding more money, they're not adding enough. The VA has 36,000, depending on whose figures you use, vacancies. If there are waits, I wonder why. I started writing about the VA in 2014. There were 34,000 vacancies. Now there's 36. And nothing in these bills in Congress or anything Congress is doing is addressing filling those vacancies. In fact, what you're going to see if this bill passes the Senate, is that those vacancies will increase because they are shifting people from clinical positions taking care of you to acting as care managers, navigators to navigate you out of the VA and into the private sector. This in spite of the fact that we know that the private sector is not ready to take care of the complex problems you as veterans have, right? Your PTSD, your MST, your traumatic brain injury, your pain problems, right? Which actually increases the risk of suicide, right? Your Agent Orange related problems, your burn pit related problems, your 1,000,000 trillion exposure related problems. In fact, what is really scary about this bill, which is going to channel more veterans into the private sector, going to make it easier for you to go to walk-in care. Now look at walk-in care, walk-in clinics. What's wrong with going to walk-in clinics if you're a veteran? I mean, I can do it, right? Well, the problem with walk-in clinics is that it fragments care. And it kind of like, it's the walk-inization of healthcare, the CVSization of healthcare. Who is staffing these walk-in clinics? Who are we overseeing the quality of care in these walk-in clinics? And increasingly, hospitals are hooking up with pharmacies to set up networks in which you are a prisoner of the walk-in clinic and the hospital, because out there in the private sector, unlike what the right wing says, we do not have a choice of where we go. Where we go is dictated by what kind of insurance we have, right? And where our docs and so forth have admitting privilege. Nobody in this country, unless they're a super gazillionaire, has total choice of wherever they want to go, right? That just doesn't exist. Pardon?
Traditional Medicare.
Traditional Medicare, too, yes. But also, you know, that your choice is determined by whether you can get an appointment, right? And one of the questions that Congress isn't asking, Congress is assuming that there's excess capacity out there in the private sector to handle veterans, like, you know, 9 million more veterans. The average wait time in the VA is like 2 days for an appointment, and I think it's 5 days for a specialty appointment. The average wait time in the private sector for a family practice doc is 24 days, 105 in Boston. You know, so there's not like, you can't just call up the best cardiologist in town and get in tomorrow, right? Because there's only 775,000 doctors in America, and there's 330 million people, right? So there are limits. But what this is doing, okay, so we're gonna have walk-in clinics. In Phoenix, when CVS was negotiating their contract with the VA for walk-in clinics, you know what they wanted the VA to pay per appointment? The average, their fee for regular people is $85. You know how much they wanted to charge the VA? $450. Right? And they went to Shulkin, and Shulkin intervened and said, no, now Shulkin isn't there anymore. Right? A veteran in Phoenix, another Phoenix story, got angry at the VA. He needed a stem cell transplant, and he didn't want to go. The VA very wisely has centers for transplants all over the country. And if you need a stem cell transplant, you go to Seattle. The VA pays your airfare, pays for your family to stay in a hotel, pays for you to stay, and the cost is $150,000 per patient. He got the VA to let him get a stem cell transplant in Phoenix. Guess how much it cost?
$450,000.
What?
$450,000.
$1 million. 10 times as much. Now, this legislation will open the floodgates for that. You have 9 million patients getting some stem cell transplants, some heart transplants, some liver transplants, 10 times as much. That's going to mean that they're going to have to cut eligibility, cut services, increase co-pays. The American public will not tolerate spending 4 times as much as it does now to take care of veterans, even though they should. So you'll see all kinds of cuts. In the bill, there is a provision to set up an Asset and Infrastructure Realignment Commission, a BRAC commission, a VA Closing Facility Commission. That commission will be created and appointed by this president, who says he wants 90% of veterans to be cared for in the private sector, whose vision of healthcare is you run to the doctor and get it fixed, right? How many doctors in the room? I wish I could run to you and get, I have a lot that I could love. You know, and I could just walk, I wouldn't have to run. I wish, you know, wave the magic wand and it's fixed. That's a sophisticated vision of healthcare, right? This commission would close VA facilities. There's a pilot program to look at the wisdom of TRICAREizing healthcare, VA care, which would mean that that the VA would become an insurer, not a provider. And you know, there are a lot of people in this room who are fighting for Medicare for all. Having watched the VA, what we need is VA care for all. Medicare is a payer. It's not a system. It's a payer. And what the VA is a system. So the VA integrates primary and mental health care. The VA delivers palliative care, home care, geriatric care, etc. I am not a veteran. And I have one of these on my car, so I have 2 of these on my car, and this one on my computer. And I believe, after watching and observing VA care, that the VA provides a model of care for all of us. The National Academies of Science, Technology, and Medicine just did a study of VA mental health care for Iraq veterans and said if it was properly staffed and providers weren't burnt out, etc., that VA mental health system could be a model for a broken mental health system in our nation. VA research benefits not only you in this room, but all of us. Thank you, VA, for my shingles vaccine. If I needed an implantable cardiac pacemaker, thank you, VA, for that. I don't smoke anymore, but if I needed a nicotine patch,